At dawn, the first light of day broke through the tree canopy, casting golden rays onto the abandoned house where Deep awoke on a simple bamboo bed. Her eyes were still tired from a restless night filled with strange, unsettling sounds, referencing images of Deep lying on her bed, with a scarf on her head, her face pale. She stepped outside to find James still slumped by the dying fire, his wrinkled shirt and face filled with worry, sweat stains on his forehead signaling a night spent vigilantly, referencing images of James sitting outside, looking worn out, holding a wooden stick. Deep quietly grabbed her jacket and draped it over him, her gaze gentle yet filled with concern. "James, you're so tired because someone was watching us last night. We have to be more careful, you can't keep doing this." But as she bent down, the small dog suddenly barked loudly and ran into the yard, sniffing a strange set of footprints on the ground. Heavy boot prints like those of a gangster and a smaller set like someone else, making Deep shiver, her hair standing on end, referencing images of the dog in the yard, its eyes sharp. She called out to James, her voice trembling. "James, the dog has found new footprints. Is it the gangster or someone else lurking? That blood-stained letter from last night still haunts me." James jolted awake, examining the tracks with a tense gaze, gripping his stick tightly. "I'll check, but you stay inside, don't go outside alone. The person may have found us through the hitman." Suddenly, the sound of dry leaves cracking echoed from the forest. A faint shadow flickered past, a flash of light from a knife, and then vanished like an invisible threat. Deep hugged the dog, her heart racing, but the dog barked furiously, running into the forest, only to return with a torn piece of black fabric, sending Deep into panic. The audience will be left wondering about the lurker. Could it be the gangster betraying them, a more dangerous force, or a sign of a bigger plot at play? Deep stepped into the yard, carrying a basket of rice, trying to forget the fear, but her eyes still darted around, gripping the basket like an invisible shield, referencing images of Deep feeding the chickens, wearing a headscarf, her face tense. She scattered rice for the chickens, their calls echoing through the peaceful space. But her heart was heavy, remembering the noise from the night before and the threatening blood-stained letter. The small dog barked quietly, running around her as if protecting her, but suddenly it stopped, staring at the bushes nearby, its fur standing on end, growling low. Deep jumped, whispering, "Dog, what is it? Is that shadow still there? I don't want to face danger again, but what should I do?" Just then a sharp sound cracked, dry leaves being crushed, followed by a hoarse whisper from the bushes, like a threat from someone hidden. Deep dropped the basket and rushed inside, but a figure in black suddenly dashed out. It could be the gangster, the glint of a knife flashing before disappearing, leaving a deep cut on a nearby tree, referencing images of the forest, a shadowy figure. She screamed, "James, come here, someone is here." James rushed out, holding his stick, but all he saw was darkness. New footprints on the ground leading into the forest, deeper, like the sign of a hunt. The dog barked loudly, charging ahead, but Deep held it back, her heart racing, her hands trembling, gripping her jacket tightly. A torn piece of black fabric fell from the bushes, carrying the strong scent of tobacco, making her shiver, fearing the gangster was planning an attack. The audience will be on edge, wondering about Deep's fate, the dark plans of the gangster, and the role of the dog as either a protector or a sign of even greater danger. Deep returned inside, her heart still racing, but she tried to stay calm as she started the fire, preparing to cook porridge for James, referencing images of Deep cooking, the light from the fire casting a warm glow, her face full of worry. She stoked the fire, the sound of the burning wood crackling warmly, but her eyes kept glancing toward the door, fearing the figure in black would return, the gleam of the knife still lingering in her memory. The dog lay near the stove, its eyes alert as if keeping watch, making her feel slightly better, but it occasionally barked softly, looking toward the door as if sensing something. Deep whispered, "James, I'm making porridge for you, but I'm scared. If that person comes back, what will we do? The blood-stained letter still haunts me." As the porridge began to boil, its smell wafting through the air, James walked in, his face filled with worry after checking the surroundings, referencing images of James standing in the house, looking tense, holding a wooden stick. He said, "I didn't see anyone, but the footprints lead into the forest. It could be the gangster or someone else who knows about our plan. We need to prepare, that person could attack at any time." Deep ladled the porridge, handing it to James, but suddenly a loud noise from outside. A tree snapping, followed by a hoarse laugh mocking, causing both of them to jump. James grabbed his stick and stepped outside, but all he saw was darkness, a torn piece of black fabric falling down, accompanied by the heavy scent of tobacco. The dog barked wildly, running out, but only returned with a confused look, making Deep shiver. The audience will be curious if the lurking figure has plans to attack, or is simply using threats to extort more money from James. After eating the porridge, James decided to return home to the village to settle debts and check the situation, referencing images of James walking on the village road, his eyes determined, but his face filled with worry. He walked down the bumpy road, but his heart was heavy remembering the noises from last night, the strange footprints and the blood-stained letter saying, "I'll be back," from the gangster. When he arrived home, he found the door had been pried open, and a knife mark was left on the wooden frame, referencing images of the thatched house, the door ajar, the light dim. He stepped inside, finding a blood-stained letter on the table. "Pay an additional 200 million or Deep will die." The letter from the gangster making James shudder, his hand gripping the letter until it ripped. James called the gangster, his voice angry. "You dare threaten Deep? I've paid enough." The gangster laughed mockingly, threatening, "Not enough, and I know she's in the forest. If not, we'll come right now, blood will spill." James clenched his fist, deciding to confront him, but suddenly, the sound of a police siren blared from far away, making him fear his hitman plan had been exposed, potentially leading to prison. He rushed outside, spotting a shadow in black pass by, the flash of a knife gleaming, then disappearing into the darkness, leaving behind a torn piece of black fabric on the ground, carrying the scent of dry blood. James picked up the fabric, his heart racing, fearing the gangster had attacked Deep. The audience will be on edge, curious about the gangster's scheme, the risks James faces with the law, and Deep's safety in the forest. While James faced danger, Deep went into the forest to chop bamboo, carrying a small knife and the dog, referencing images of Deep working in the forest, wearing a headscarf, sweating profusely. She chopped each bamboo branch, sweat dripping down her face, but her eyes remained vigilant, remembering the strange sounds from the night before and the blood-stained letter threatening her life. The dog barked softly, running around her as if it were on guard. But then suddenly it stopped, staring at the bushes, its fur standing on end, growling low. Deep jumped and whispered, "Dog, is something there? I don't want to face danger again, but what should I do? Where is James?" Just then a loud cracking sound broke through the air. The bamboo snapped, followed by heavy footsteps and a hoarse laugh, like the mocking sound of a predator. Deep dropped the knife and ran, but a figure dressed in black dashed out. It was the gangster, his cold eyes locking onto her, the knife in his hand flashing. He slashed at a nearby bamboo branch, leaving a deep cut. "Deep, pay back what you owe, James, or you won't survive. I've been watching you since last night." Deep screamed and ran toward the house, but the gangster chased after her, his knife slashing at the bamboo, leaving a trail of blood on the leaves, perhaps his own blood or someone else's. The dog barked loudly, biting into the gangster's leg, causing him to retreat, disappearing into the forest, but leaving behind a torn piece of black fabric and another blood-stained letter. 200 million or die. The audience will be on the edge of their seats, curious about Deep's fate, the dark plot of the gangster, and the role of the dog as either her protector or a sign of even greater danger approaching. James returned to the forest to find Deep, who was shaking and recounting her encounter with the gangster, referencing images of James and Deep in the forest, looking anxious, holding the torn black fabric. He decided to take her to the city for medical treatment, booked tickets in a hurry, but his heart was filled with worry about the hitman, referencing images of the street, James driving with tense eyes. At the hospital, the doctor examined the bruises and new cuts on Deep's neck, suspecting she had been attacked. "She needs rest, but this wound is dangerous, it could get infected, and there are signs of serious threats." James worriedly guided Deep to a bedding store, referencing images of a store, Deep picking out items, her eyes filled with confusion and fear. In the evening, they returned to the house in the forest, carrying the new bedding, referencing images of the hut, the warm atmosphere, yet filled with unease. James cooked meat and they had dinner together, but suddenly, the sound of dry leaves being crushed echoed. A shadow in black passed by the door, the glint of a knife flashing, followed by the hoarse laughter of the gangster. The dog barked loudly, running out, but only to see darkness, leaving behind a torn piece of black fabric and fresh footprints on the ground. Deep hugged James, her voice trembling with fear. "James, can't we escape from them? The blood-stained letter, the cuts, and that man. I'm so scared." James held her hand, his eyes determined. "I will find a way, even if I have to face dark forces, even if the law gets involved." Suddenly, the sound of a police siren echoed from afar, causing both of them to freeze in fear, wondering if the hitman's plan had been exposed. The audience will be eager to know whether James can protect Deep or if danger will continue to lurk, pushing them into a spiral of crime and law enforcement.